We're going to try to do a slightly different type of video today, I think. So, I mean, I've been doing a fair bit of commentaries on my games, and I'll still do my best to continue to do that. But I think one thing that I've been getting asked a lot as well, whether it's by newer players or, even experienced players, is what's the best book in 60 Grassy? Or what are some of the most meta books? Or, what should I be doing when I'm putting a book together? And I thought, having recently hit 3K I thought I'd do a bit of a video to showcase some of the books that I've used, but also give some ideas in terms of book building, in terms of looking at different options. We can talk a little bit about the meta. There was a video I was supposed to do, which was part 2 to the tier list, that I don't know, I'll get around to it sometime. I feel like this might be a better way, and also helps out new players more in terms of what they can look at when they first join the game as well. I don't like to, give too much direction in terms of how people, play the game, because I think at the end of the day, Arcanists is just a bit of fun. You should enjoy it. So yeah, I guess keep that in mind as you're going through this. Don't feel as if you need to play these books. But I guess if we talk about 60G and what the meta looks like, I guess you could say, the bread and butter, or what I like to call the bread and butter of 60G is, in most traditional or standard 60G books, this is what you're going to come up against, right? You're going to come up against Gate, Flash, all these spells, and generally there's about 4 free slots. Usually one or two of these slots is dedicated to a tower, Cog Tower, Sanctuary, Ice Tower, and then the other slots could be, Pebble Shot, some form of aerial, it could be minions and all that sort of stuff. So I guess if you're starting off in 60 Grassy and you're versing a lot of these books and you're thinking, well, I want to build something like that, what should I start with? This is a fairly good template because it gives you access to a lot of the best spells in the game, and the reason why these spells are so good is because they're very flexible and versatile. So, especially Pegasus, Ice Shield, Flight, and Forest Seed. The best part about them is that they can be used both offensively and defensively. So the reason why these books are effective is because mixed books allow you to not counter, but it allows you to deal with a lot of different threats as they come up. So I'll talk about, a little bit about spells the main books that I used to use. And people also say, there's no variety in the game, you can't use different things. And in my climb, to 3K, I've used a fair bit of different books as well, despite what people might think. So, when I first came back into the game, I started using the standard Shock Shield mix, which a lot of people still use. I've highlighted in orange here any spells that you can typically replace. I mean, technically you can replace the Shock Bomb, Shock Shield combo, but if you're replacing that, that's not really a Shock Shield book at that point. You're changing sort of the entire archetype. So I've decided, let's leave those be. The main spells we look at replacing is probably Pebble Shot or Dark Knight. Sometimes you can even replace the tower. It depends on your playstyle. And I've given some examples of replacement spells here. Usually you'd replace Pebble Shot with like an aerial or an aura. If you want to replace both Pebble Shot and Dark Knight, you can go with Mega Boulder. There's a lot of other spells you can try here. I've just given examples of things that I've tried replacing it with myself. And also I've tried a lot of replacement spells, and we'll talk about it later, but these are just a few examples. I wouldn't be able to list them all here if I were to put them all down. This is just the most common ones that personally I've tried. I know other people have tested a lot of different things too. So I used this book for a little while, and I guess I sort of went back to the book I enjoyed using the most in, I guess you could say, in OG Arcanists, which was a Vine Bloom mix, right? And the Vine Bloom mix, originally I didn't have Dragonite because that didn't exist back then. I had Cog Tower as a double tower book instead. So it was a fairly defensive book with Dark Knight and Vine Bloom as the win conditions, with Swarm as the backup win condition. So the main spells you'd be looking at replacing, you can change it out for Rain of Fire, Snowman, for some type of minion for more top control, or you could have a more defensive playstyle with, you know, Cog Tower or Trolls as well, which is for Drain Fodder. So, you know, this book is, as you can see, this book is fairly different to, you know, to the Shock Bomb Shock Shield book. And I think the main thing when you're playing 6D Grassy and when you're building your book is just thinking about some key elements, which is, you know, does my book have a tower? Is my book able to play aggressively, and is it able to play defensively? So, you know, Pegasus, Forest Seed, Arcane Flash, Drain, all of these are just good spells to have. So you can tend to build a book around that. I've also given, you know, as we sort of progress, I think this was when I was about 2.1, 2.2k, you know, people started realizing what my book was in its entirety, and there's no perfect book in Arcanists, right? You're going to get counted if you keep using the same book. I don't think anyone can, you know, get to 2.5k or whatever it is without being willing to adapt and change up their book as well. So I took out Vine Bloom, despite how much it hurt at the time, because I really liked that as a spell in a win condition, and I adapted it in terms of a more control heavy book. You know, I put in some extra minions, I put in Ice Shield, I put in Snowman, I put in, you know, Egg, I took out Pebble Shot, I tried Aura of Decay. There's a lot of different things that I tried, and the main advantage of this book over the Vine Bloom book is it actually plays fairly similarly because it's still flightless, but the main thing is you don't reveal that you have Vine Bloom, because once they see you have Vine Bloom, they can see the majority of your book, because the rest of your book doesn't really change. It's just 1 or 2 slots that's changed. And you'll see that this book actually has about 5, I would argue about 5 slots that you can actually end up substituting in and out. And I've tried a lot of different spells. I mean, Monarch wasn't here back then when I first played this book, but just as an example, you know, these were different things that can be tried out in something like this as well. And I guess it was around this time where Rain of Fire sort of came into the meta. It sort of destroyed minion heavy books. So for a while I shifted into a Rain of Fire book as well. So, you know, I didn't play the Shock Shield book. You'll see that this book is pretty much identical to the Shock Shield book. Instead of Shock Shield, we have Rain of Fire, and we also have Totem from the Blood book. And that was quite, you know, that was quite oppressive when it first came out. I used this book for a while until, I guess, you know, both Rain of Fire and Totem got heavy nerfs, and now we've got Seasons, which has come out as well. So Seasons has kind of spawned a new archetype with Dryad, with Breeze. Monarchs is a really effective tool. You've got 4 Seasons. Once again, there's a lot of replacement spells here, but I'd just be repeating myself. So I decided not to list them all out. You can scroll up or you can scroll down, and yeah, you can just have a think about, you know, your own ideas in terms of how to improve on some of these books as well. But one spell that I often replaced was the 4 Seasons, whether it was with Aura of Decay or with some other aerial, and yeah, I mean, it felt pretty good to do that. So those were, I guess, you know, the main books that I played. Right, these are the books that I would most likely be using at any given point in time. But I also had some side books. I mean, side books, what I mean by that is occasionally I throw these into the mix, and these are they're more of a wild card. They're fairly different from what I traditionally play, and, you know, sometimes they can be good counter books to the meta, or they can you know, they can add in, you know, an entirely different flavor to your gameplay. So the first one is just a pit book, right? You've got Wraith, you've got Aura, and most importantly, you've got Swallowing Pit. Oftentimes, you know, you run Dark Knight in this book as well. There's a few slots that you can replace with things like Death Bomb, with things like Dragon Egg. So there's a lot that you can do with this sort of build, but I've just highlighted in orange the most frequent spells that you'll see being swapped in and out of something like this. And you've also got something like Full Underdark. Full Underdark is actually a really, really strong book, and just because it counters the meta inherently, and it's usable all the way up to pretty much any rating, especially if your opponent isn't expecting it. You might not always get the win, but, you know, it counters the meta enough in that you'll probably end up with a draw at the very worst. And I guess I wanted to put Full Underdark in here for for one particular reason, which is, I think, full books is a really good example of options in terms of book building, right? Because full books, you always take the full book, you pretty much always take Arcane Gate, so you always have roughly, you have about 3 slots that you can mix and match. In the 3 slots, the most standard that I've taken is Tree, Flash, and Egg, but I've tried Pegasus. You can make some zombie Pegasi before you go into Lich. I've tried Trolls and Monarchs for a more defensive option, because if you're playing against people with Mega Boulder or aggressive books, you can get double or triple drains off to really help stabilize. Tower is good. Arcane Arrows is a more aggressive option instead of Eggs, so if you don't feel like you need Dragon Egg and you are not afraid, I guess, of your opponent, then you can go Arcane Arrows and try hit them. And even things like Static Ball, and I'm not kidding in terms of, I actually think Static Ball is really good with full Lich and full Light, because you just pop Static Ball down in the standard game of 60 Grassy, and there's actually nothing your opponent can hit you with. I mean, they can hit you with Swarm, they can hit you with Flash, and that's it. And the thing is, if you put down 2 Static Balls, if you put down Static Balls and you cast Den of Darkness, there's actually nothing in 60 Grassy that can kill Den of Darkness that's in a Static Ball, because you've got Pebble Shot, which doesn't go through, you've got Dark Knight, which you can Swallowing Pit, and what this does is you've got a Static Ball that protects you from things like Mega Boulder. It protects you from everything that would be a threat to Lich until turn 5, and then you just cast Lich them. So Static Ball is actually a surprisingly good defensive option. It's just that, if you do run Static Ball, you're still committing to you don't have that 3rd spell, I guess, once you do end up going to Lich, which is often fine. I've even tried things like the Minion Book. The Minion Book is fairly flexible as well. It gives you a lot of options. And I've tried a lot of bits and pieces. Like all of these spells I've listed, I've swapped in and out in terms of combining with these, I guess you could say, book archetypes, if you will. So there's other aspects that I've tried that I just haven't listed on here. And I mean, apart from books that I've generally played, there's also been a lot of books that I've seen, right? There's the Comet Mix book. You've got Comet, you've got Frost Dragon, you've got Aura. So this is very, very different from standard 60 Grassy, from the Flight Mix. You've got things like Wrath Mixes. You've got Wrath Pixies, which is a very slow and quite painful book to play and play against, in my opinion at least. But people can run Wrath with Pixies, they can run Wrath with Imps. All in all, there's a lot of Wrath mixes out there. You've also got fairly aggressive books, such as you might run Flight with a number of aerials to deal with a lot of minions. And you might also run Mega Boulder for an offensive option alongside with Dark Knight to quickly end the game, right? This is quite a scary book in and of itself, so it's a more aggressive option if that's your play style and something that you want to do. And I guess one thing that I will say is, people might look at the books that I've played and say, oh, well, you've only played like a couple of different variations and they all seem really, really defensive. Why is that? And I think it's just a matter of rating difference, right? Just by the nature of rating difference and versing, if I'm gaining 2 rating and losing 20 plus rating, then a lot of the books that I play need to account for more and more situations. So they have to be defensive in nature. But, if, for example, there wasn't a rating difference that was keeping things in check, I could throw in all sorts of random things too. I mean, I played for Arcane for my 3K game. I can play aggro books and books like these with Mega Boulder and stuff. These are actually really good books. It's just that they're not as safe. So yes, I've lent more towards the safe book, but it doesn't mean that these, I guess you could say, riskier books are not viable by any means. There's also, I guess, the more the heavy aggro books, such as the book that Noret used. So this is pretty much going all in from the very beginning. There's no drain, no protection shield, no type of defensive tool, except I guess you could say Cog Tower. And you've got things like Whisper Arrow, you've got things like Ice Bomb, you've got Rain of Fire, Rain of Arrows to really, really pressure your opponent. And of course Glide, you've got Glide, Flight and Vine Bridge to consistently get to your opponent over time. So all of these are just different ideas, and I've put them in my, I guess, 60 grassy guide. It's not, so if you are interested, feel free to go over there to check it out. But I guess I just wanted to list out some different options for new players, because when you first come into the game, it can be a little bit overwhelming, and seeing, I guess, some books already laid out there for you might be a good way for you to start trying out different things. But what I would say is don't feel discouraged. Just try different strategies, because oftentimes they can work quite well. And I wanted to do a quick overview in terms of how many spells are actually viable, I guess, in a game, in a rated 60G game, right? So I've highlighted, or I've marked in red, any spell that personally I've used or seen used against me at a high level of 60 grassy competitively, or spells that I genuinely think would actually be really good in 60 grassy, that you can sub in and sub out. Full Arcane, I think, is actually surprisingly good. I've used it, and there's a video of it that I posted quite recently where I used it against Quinn. Rain of Fire, Rain of Arrows, we've talked about all that. Mega Boulder, Pebs, and also minions, by the fact that they're a minion, will always end up seeing use, just because the Minion Book itself is quite good, and that gives you access to all these minions. Full Storm has about half its book that can be used. I've even highlighted Storm here, and people might look at this and go, what are you talking about? I think Storm is actually a little bit underutilized, in the sense that if you do have the 5-slot investment into Book of Storm, I actually think Storm is a really good aerial. Like, it's probably better than Rain of Fire in a lot of cases. It does it's like 70 or 100 damage oftentimes in Arc 2 compared to Arc 1. So I think it's one that could do a lot of testing. It's just a solid rechargeable aerial overall. Frostbook, you can pretty much use the entire book, and people have used pretty much every single spell in here. It's just how you mix and match it with your book. Full Lich, we've obviously talked about. Light has about half its book that's usable. Full Nature is a very viable option in 60 grassy. Seas probably is a little bit unfortunate. I'd say the only one you're going to see most use out of is Water Trolls and Sea Lord in the Minion Book. Cogs has a fair bit of things. Seasons, which has just come out, has done very well. Illusion has seen a lot of play in Rush books. I've even put Swapperoo on me, and people might say, what the hell are you talking about? I've actually tried Swapperoo in some of the control books, and it actually ends up being quite effective when you can Swapperoo yourself and their minion, or you can Swapperoo yourself and you're trapped, and it's probably better than you think, right? And of course you've got Glide and Floating Tower, and Book of Blood has a lot of good options too. You've got Vampire in the Minion Book, you've got Gargoyle, Fleshwind for aggressive books, Mist is a second aura. Yeah, so if you really look at how many spells have been and can be used, yes, some of them fall into full books, but it's like over 40-50% of spells can actually be used in 60 grassy. It's just how you end up using it and combining it into your book. For new players, what I would recommend is start with a full book, right? Whether it's full Underdark is probably the easiest to start with, or Full Nature might be fairly easy to start with, and just stick to that book and play a lot of games with that book, because you'll have 2 or 3 spell slots that you can change, and I guess all the full books come with a consistent strategy, right? There's for Full Fire, you might just be trying to hit your opponent. For Full Dark, you might try to turn everything into zombies, or whatever it is, right? Full Light, you might be trying to survive. There's a solid game plan, and I think when you first come into Arcanists, it can be a bit overwhelming as to what to do, whereas a full book gives you direction in terms of the style of gameplay that you're going for. Once you get familiar with full books and you get familiar with a lot of the spells in Raid games, then you can try and start building your own book. You can try test out a lot of these books that I've listed, or a lot of books that you've seen. Oftentimes a spell that you find very, very oppressive, or you might say that seems OP, you play it for yourself and you realize, what, it's actually not that good. So what I would recommend is just play as many different books, play as many different spells as you can. And yeah, there is a meta, but I think it's a lot more rich than people give it credit for. There's a lot of things that we can try out and that we can experiment, and I feel like there's a lot of room for innovation as well. So hopefully that was helpful. I don't do this type of video very often. Let me know if it's something that you want to see more of. I've only posted some books here, so if you do want some more book ideas, let me know. I'm more than happy to help out. But yeah, I'd be interested if there was any other books that people thought I've maybe missed, or any certain archetypes, then let me know and I can always pop it on here for everyone to see as well.